Hello and welcome to this video. Today's video is going to be a tutorial to show you how to install Trackit 2020. This is the latest version 2 on your network. So I'm just going to go through a small domain setup just to sort of paint a picture, just so the installation process is nice and clear. For this I'm going to be using VMware. So you will see I have a domain controller set up. So my domain name is tn there, tn.test. And then I have a separate database server, which is also on the domain. I'm just simply using SQL Express here, 2016, but it will kind of mirror, as you know, a separate database server, which a lot of companies use as a dedicated environment. And then finally, I have my server that's just been provisioned, which is going to be having the application installed. So this particular example today is going to go through the process of logging onto the machine, installing Trackit, and then pointing to the database server. Quite a common setup, the dual server model. But of course, if you prefer to have everything on one box, that is absolutely fine too. So I thought to start, a couple of things we should do. Within the domain controller, I'm going to go to the Active Directory, and we will see at this moment in time the server's called FP20XX. It's not in that group at the moment, so not on the domain. And then we've got our users. So we've got the administrator. So when we set this up to be a domain controller, the built-in administrator becomes part of that. So I am actually logged on to this domain controller as the tn/administrator, which is obviously the domain name, the domain administrator, and also the local administrator. Currently at the moment I'm the local administrator on here, although it is on the domain. And then I'm just a local administrator here. Again, I'm not on the domain, but we will see that registered shortly. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to add a new user. So we will just simply click on new user, and we will call this TN admin. I know it's quite common for people to set up administrator accounts or system accounts just to look after installations on the network. And the reason I'm doing this, I don't want to teach my granny to suck eggs, but just to sort of give you a bit of an understanding if you are quite new and fresh to Trackit, and just to give you a clear sort of indication what actually happens during the process. We'll set up to never expire, and we'll give it a password. Once again, apologies. I'm not trying to teach my granny to suck eggs, and obviously this video is going to be fairly comprehensive, and as such it will then hopefully, as I say, give people a good indication. Of course you'll be able to fast forward to bits that you feel are not pertinent, but I just want to, as I say, just try and be very holistic and capture everything during this process. So we can see there's my admin account, and obviously logs on as TN admin. Member of. So at the moment it's a domain user. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the domain admin group. And as you can see the description there, designated administrators of the domain. So we'll click on OK. And there we have it, part of that group now. So that's step one done there with the user account. So I have my account there that's going to be doing the install of Trackit. And then if I just jump over to the database server, again I'm just logged on as the local administrator here, but we'll see there is the server name and the instance of the database. And then finally, we have the server we're going to perform the installation. At the moment, we can see we've got a computer name, but it is just a work group. So we're going to add it to the domain. That's a pretty straightforward process. We'll just simply go into the change and then add it to the domain. In fact, before I do this, let me just jump in with the new account that I've created. Just to show that that account can obviously register the server to the domain. So we will need to do a restart. We'll do a restart later. It's going to go into the account to see the users. So easy way to do it here, obviously. So we'll see at the moment we've just got the built-in administrator, nobody else there at the moment. And if we look at the administrators, TN domain admins automatically now become part of that with the domain. Obviously, I need to do a reboot first of all, but we can see now that from adding that to the network, we can see the domain admins are automatically becoming local administrators to this machine. So although you may want to just log on as the local administrator, it shouldn't make a difference if you log on as one of the administrator accounts you've added to Active Directory. And if they're in the domain admin group, then obviously they will be able to be part of that local admin group to do the installation, if that makes sense. So let's run a reboot. And at this point, I'm just going to pause the video and then we will go through the next step of installation. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log on as a different user. Of course, I could log on as this account to do the install, but we will sign into TN. As it's the first time they've logged on, it's just creating the profile for TN admin. We will also see now that we are on the domain, and at this point I haven't got the software locally on this machine, so I'm just going to pause that while we bring the application over. Okay, so the Trackit setup file is now downloaded in my downloads folder, and I'm going to run this. Usually as a best practice, always right click and run as administrator. Shouldn't have to do this because obviously it doesn't need to have the elevated privileges, but just to, as I say, just to, for the sake of this, I'm going to run it without running as an administrator. And again, just to confirm, we're going to the computer management and we go to the local users. We've got the local administrator accounts, and then we've got the groups with the administrators, and we can see that members of the domain are in the administrators here as well. Okay, so I'll close it down. Just double click on the setup file. And just to talk you through this, so the setup file is going to extract all of those files you need to start the installation, and the default setting is obviously within program files. No problem about leaving it there. So I'll click on install and allow it to extract. Now Trackit is a web-based product, so your server where you install it will have to run IIS. So if I go into the server manager, you'll see when I look at all servers here, I've got IIS running. Now, if you haven't installed everything that's required for IIS, then not to worry, there is a PowerShell which will install the necessary files to complete the installation process. Right, so we have opening message. So if you are an existing Trackit customer and you're using 11.4 or earlier, then definitely worth having a look at the feature differences. Ourselves at True North, obviously been dealing with this product for over 20 years now, so please feel free to give us a ring. You'll see the details there in the ticker at the bottom. You can also email us and just reach out to us. We're more than happy to sit down, schedule a meeting, and spend an hour and a half with you doing a Trackit overview, outlining the differences, and at the same time understanding what you need from the product today. Again, if you are new to Trackit and obviously not an existing customer, again, please give us a call. The number is there below. Reach out to us. We'll happily provide you with a product overview and obviously talk about your requirements to help set you up for success. So I'm going to click on understand, click on next. You'll see there's a number of languages we can select for the Trackit server. So this application, I'm just going to keep it English. Hasn't found the .NET framework, so it's going to try and install it for us. So as I mentioned before, some of the dependencies will try and self-install. Now, in between this demonstration, if I feel that we need to pause the video just so it doesn't go on and on because some of the installation is going to take a while, I will click on pause and resume when we get to the next step. So I think at this stage, I'm just going to pause the video and we will start again very shortly. Okay, so the system has set up the .NET framework for us, so it's in the latest version. You'll see from the message we need to restart before it can continue. So just follow that along. We'll restart the computer now. And then proceed with the install. Okay, so we've done the restart. So again, start through the process again from the beginning. We'll see there's a warning there that says this setup will restart the IIS web services on the machine. So any internet client connections to the server are safely closed before continuing with the setup. Accept the license agreement. we'll go for a standard evaluation. A standard installation. If you do the evaluation method, then that's going to put some dummy data in for you. So any of the new clients, you may want to go through that. Again, any of the existing customers, you may prefer to use the standard install. And if you are going to be migrating data, there is a data migration tool which will allow you to do I suppose, a snapshot of your existing stuff, configure it, play with it. When you're happy, you can do then a data refresh. You can do all of that obviously while still using your existing 11 installation. I'm going to click on next. This point asks us what we want to do, so we're going to create the new Trackit database. In terms of asset management, so when you go out and do a discovery on your network, when you audit the hardware and software configuration of a machine, then you need to install client management for asset management as well. So that will just give you some additional options in terms of the installation. Also, what you can do as well is there are additional modules you can purchase, such as remote, deploy, patch manager. So all of these can become available with client management. So a very, very useful application. So I'm going to click on next. And at this point now, we're going to be installing some additional IIS server roles on this machine. So we're going to click on yes here. And the PowerShell is going to add some additional stuff to IIS if it isn't already installed. Okay, so IIS has been updated there, and we're going to add our license information here now. So obviously existing customers, when you go into your BMC support portal, you go into the licensing, and you can download these license files. We'll just use the temporary license files for this this video. And click on next. Asking the destination where we're going to install. So obviously if you've got your server there and you've got different drive volumes where you store your applications or your data, etc., then obviously just select, I'm going to just keep the defaults. And then the next part here is to use SQL Server. So if you haven't already got a SQL Server installed, you can select the second option, and that's going to install SQL Express 2017 with advanced services. So if you are using existing SQL Server or SQL Express, you will need advanced services there as well. So I'm going to use an existing SQL Server. As mentioned, this demonstration is going to be looking at the database server. So the next bit here, now it's going to ask for the SQL Server name and the database. So the SQL Server name is obviously within this database server. So I'm just going to log into it. So we've got the server name. Let's just get the syntax right. And the database name. So I'm just going to call it Track20XX. You can use the SQL Server Authentication or the Windows Authentication. Hopefully I remember the password for my essay. Click on next. And if all that passes, then it will jump to the next screen. If it doesn't like it, then I need to go back and do something else. Okay, so couldn't connect to the server. Check the server name, port number, username, and try again. Got the server name right. make sure I got the password correct. And try again. Okay, again, so I've had an issue there, not being able to connect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to try Windows Authentication. So we'll try one with TN admin. Click on Next. Let's see if we have a bit more luck with Windows Authentication. And again, couldn't connect to the server. So I'm going to do a couple of tests just so we can get over this next obstacle. So obviously the SA account was probably okay, but first of all, let's just do a quick ping just to see there is a connection. Okay, so that's fine there. I'm going to jump over to the server itself and just see if the protocols are enabling us. So we have SQL Server Network configuration. It's currently disabled on TCP IP. So I'm going to enable that. And we'll do a restart of that service. And hopefully at this point we should be able to proceed. So once again, as we're looking over the network, it does need to have the TCP IP protocol enabled. And third time lucky, or maybe fourth time I should say. Okay, I figured what the issue was. A simple one really there was the network configuration, the protocol for SQL Express there when I went to the TCP IP protocol. In the IP addresses, I've noticed there wasn't the port, so I've just added that there as well. And if I go back into Trackit now with the details and click on Next, you'll see now it allows us to proceed to the next screen. So from here now we need to add a Trackit database administrator. So you'll see that during the installation it's going to create a database account called underscore sm sysadmin underscore. So just obviously keep a record of this database password. So I'm going to just use my typical database passwords, such as using for my demonstrations. Click on Next, and the next bit there is obviously the what you want the URL to be for Trackit. Again, makes sense to keep the defaults there of Trackit and self-service for your end users. Click on Next. So now it's looking for the administrator account so it can start applying those sort of COM packages to the local machine. So of course this is where it needs to be a local administrator. So we've talked about, obviously I could just wait on as the administrator, but as explained at the beginning, we talked about when you have your domain administrators and the machine is connected to the domain, that automatically becomes part of that local admin group, and you should be able to continue this installation with this. And as I said, there's been a couple of little challenges I've had during this video to install, but obviously if I'd done it all in one fell swoop and all perfect, then we wouldn't learn and benefit from it. So the purpose of this video is a bit of a tutorial and to show that even an expert who's been using Trackit for 20 years, or should I say a Trackit expert as opposed to an expert, still can fall into hurdles and obstacles which needs to be overcome. And so hopefully, as I say, this is going to be a more of a value add to you rather than just the perfect install from scratch. So let me add in the password, click on next, validates that, all looks good. And then we're going to the next stage of installation. Now the product is going to copy files into certain locations and whatnot. And as this will take a little while, I'm just going to pause the video again. Just a quick unpause, just so you can see the installations going through its various operations. Going into the final stages of the installation process. And then when this completes, it will ask if you want to launch, but a bit of a pointless message, if I'll be honest with you, because you do have to typically reboot the server upon completing the install to allow it to complete the full process. So rather than open it and get some error message pop up, depending on how things have been installed, it's just simply best to reboot the server once you've completed the installation process. And that's the installation completed. So when you first log into Trackit, it's got the built-in administrator. So that's not anything to do with your system, your server, etc. That's your database even. This is the administrator account for Trackit, which you do the configuration. So it will start off with a default password of welcome, and any other new technicians that you add will all have that same default password, which they can obviously change thereafter. Although you'll most likely probably start using Active Directory authentication. So acknowledge that. I'm going to click on finish, and I'm going to perform the reboot. I'm going to just yet. Just run the reboot. And while it's restarting, we go back into our Active Directory. It goes to our computers. And obviously, when it wasn't on the domain, it wasn't in our list, but now it is. So all great there, all working accordingly. Just check our database server. Fantastic. So there's the Trackit database. Which will look set up. Great stuff. And then Trackit BCM, which is the client management database. So this does act as a standalone as well, which is fantastic. So if ever you do outgrow Trackit and you want to sort of go to the next level of IT service management, and you're looking at footprints, remedy force, remedy, it's a simple case of unhooking this off Trackit and then hooking it back onto your next ITSM solution. So it does work standalone, but it does also integrate with Trackit, and the integration would have been completed as part of the installation process. So if I go to the server, let's just move it out of the way. That was what I was using just to test the connectivity of the database. So good little tool this is when you save a file. Let's do a text component. Open it up, and if we just go File, Save As, put it in brackets, sorry, test.udl. Just replace it, it's already there anyway. this creates this little tool which you can check the connectivity to your SQL Server. So obviously this is just local anyway, but so I just did a quick test locally, and I also had this running on the Trackit server, and it allowed me to just check the connectivity to that database. And because I wasn't getting a connectivity, it allowed me to go to the protocol to ensure that the port was in there as well, which was one of the issues why I couldn't connect. Just going to go back into the SQL Management Studio. Just another good little tip this will be for you. So we've just installed Trackit Release 2. And from Release 1, the integration process was done slightly different. So currently if we go into BCM and we look at the tables here, we look at the administrators. You'll note currently I've only got the system and the admin in the table. We just close that off. Minimize this now on our Trackit server. Let's go into the Trackit login. It's a bit later. You remember that the opening password is welcome, all lowercase. Now I'm logging for the first time, so I just need to update the password. There are some options here which you can do within the Trackit configuration. So now I am logged into Trackit for the first time. Go into the administrators group. Back in my database, you will see that the Trackit account has been added. So the first time you log into Trackit, it will update and it will create the integration between Trackit and client management. And if we go to the hamburger menu, go to the configuration, go to asset management and the configuration, test the server, successful. Just go back out and back in again. Test the database, successful too. So that means now that when we configure client management, we can do all the configuration from within Trackit. It's going to write it into the BCM database. That will do all the auditing stuff, capture the data, and then that will write it back into Trackit for us as well. It won't do everything, it will just give you the key information. But if you wanted to get really deep diving into that information using things like the software license management, which is currently in there, and software metering, then you could just do all of that from the BCM console. But we will do some more video tutorials with that at a later date. But hopefully just for now, that's just given you a good indicator how to install Trackit on your domain when you have a separate database server and you have your footprint server, excuse me, footprint server FP there, confused myself there, Trackit server, and you are creating a domain administrator within your Active Directory. Remember that that administrator, as part of the domain admin, will become part of the local admins when you log on to that machine, so you can install with a local admin or log in with that domain admin to do the installation. So either way should work with Trackit. Some takeaways, of course, just make sure that the protocols, the TCP/IP protocols, are enabled so they can talk to each other if you're going across the network. It does look at port 1433. So again, some little takeaways away from the obviously the securities there is could be things to do with the firewall blocking. So this tutorial, as I say, the intention was to just give you a flavor of how to install Trackit on the domain across the network, and with a couple of the challenges that we had, hopefully it gives you some indicators in case you have some issues when you go through your installation. So thank you for watching, and catch you on the next video.